few years ago, I moved to a quiet rural town after spending most of my life surrounded by noise, traffic, and crowded streets. I had always hated the constant chaos of city life. The endless sirens at night, neighbors blasting music through thin apartment walls, and the feeling of never truly being alone slowly wore me down over the years. So when I finally saved enough money to relocate, I chose a small neighborhood hidden between miles of thick forest and winding country roads. The area was peaceful in a way I had never experienced before. There were no busy intersections outside my window, no groups of people yelling late at night, and no non-stop distractions. Most evenings were so quiet that I could hear insects chirping outside or the wind pushing through the trees. For the first time in years, I felt calm. One of the biggest reasons I fell in love with the area was the forest trails surrounding the neighborhood. Practically right outside my back door was a narrow dirt path that disappeared deep into the woods. At first, I only walked short distances because I wasn't familiar with the terrain. But over time, those walks turned into long weekend hikes. Every Saturday morning, I'd wake up early, throw on hiking boots, grab a water bottle and my phone, and spend hours wandering through the woods. The forest quickly became my escape. There were hidden creeks, strange rock formations, abandoned wooden bridges, and tiny clearings that felt untouched by the outside world. Some trails eventually connected to a local nature reserve nearby. It wasn't a huge state park or anything famous, just a small public hiking area with a parking lot, picnic benches, and a public restroom near the trail entrance. After discovering that my private wooded path connected directly to the public trails, I started making it part of my routine. I would spend most of the morning exploring the deeper woods near my neighborhood, then eventually cut over to the public trails to rest for a few minutes before hiking home. Another habit I developed was recording little videos during my hikes. They weren't meant for social media or YouTube. I never posted them anywhere. They were more like personal video diary entries. Whenever I found an interesting spot in the woods, I'd pull out my phone and record a short clip talking about where I was and what I was thinking in that moment. It sounds silly now, but those videos helped me feel connected to the places I explored. I imagined one day putting them together into a long, personal montage of all the hidden places I had discovered over the years. Some of the locations I found honestly looked unreal. One afternoon, I discovered a small waterfall hidden deep in the woods. Water poured down a rocky cliff into a narrow creek that twisted through the trees for what looked like miles. Sunlight filtered through the leaves overhead and reflected off the moving water in a way that almost looked fake. Standing there felt dreamlike. But the place I found on the day this story happened was much less impressive. That morning started normally enough. I headed into the woods shortly after sunrise and spent a couple hours wandering unfamiliar trails. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. I can't explain it logically. I just felt uneasy. Every snapping twig made me jump. Every gust of wind through the trees sounded threatening. I kept catching myself looking over my shoulder for no reason. I had walked those woods dozens of times before and never once felt nervous there. But that day my anxiety kept building with every step. At one point I almost turned around and went home. Instead, I kept walking until I eventually found a small clearing hidden between thick patches of trees. The area wasn't beautiful like the waterfall or creek I'd discovered before. Most of the clearing was muddy and swampy, with dark standing water covering parts of the ground. Still, there was something peaceful about it. The sounds of the woods faded there. Everything felt strangely still. For the first time all morning, my nerves relaxed. I pulled out my phone and recorded a quick video. "Just found this little clearing," I said into the camera while slowly turning around. "Probably gonna head over to the public trails after this and then head home. I've been walking for hours." The video lasted maybe 10 seconds before I slipped my phone back into my pocket and continued hiking. Eventually, I reached the public nature trails and made my way toward the restroom building near the parking lot. By then, I was exhausted and honestly ready to go home. I went into the restroom, washed my hands, splashed some water on my face, and headed back outside. The second I stepped out, a man walked directly toward me. "Hey there," he said confidently. The suddenness of it caught me off guard. He wore a black hoodie despite the warm weather, along with sunglasses and a purple baseball cap pulled low over his face. Something about him immediately made me uncomfortable. I couldn't explain why at the time. Maybe it was the way he approached me so directly. Maybe it was the way he smiled without warmth behind it. I forced a polite smile anyway. "Hey," I replied quietly. He made some awkward joke about us almost bumping into each other and laughed at himself. I gave a fake chuckle and started walking away, hoping the interaction would end there. Instead, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him following several feet back. He waved casually. "Looks like we're taking the same trail," he said. Every alarm bell in my head started going off. Trying not to panic, I stopped walking and lied, telling him I was actually waiting for someone. I even stretched my arms and pretended I was killing time until they arrived. He nodded slowly and walked a little farther ahead. Then he suddenly turned around and walked back toward me. "Actually," he said, "could you help me real quick?" I froze. He explained that his car hood was stuck and claimed he needed someone with smaller fingers to help pop it open while he pulled the latch. The story made absolutely no sense. What unsettled me most was how rehearsed it sounded, like he had used the excuse before. I pointed out that he had just said he was taking the trail, not heading to his car. Without missing a beat, he laughed and claimed he was taking the trail to get back to the parking lot. At that point, my stomach was in knots. I genuinely considered locking myself back inside the restroom and calling someone for help. Before I could decide what to do, a young couple walked down the nearby trail. Without thinking, I immediately walked toward them. "Hey," I said loudly to the woman, pretending to recognize her. "How've you been?" The woman looked confused for maybe half a second before her expression changed completely. She looked at my face, then briefly at the man behind me, and instantly understood something was wrong. She played along perfectly. We started making awkward fake small talk while the man lingered nearby watching us. For a moment, I honestly thought he was trying to figure out whether I actually knew them or not. Finally, after what felt like forever, he turned and walked toward the parking lot. The couple stayed with me while we watched him get into a small red sedan parked near the edge of the lot. I specifically remember it looking like a red Chevy Cruze. Then he drove away. Once he was gone, I thanked them repeatedly and explained that the guy had been making me uncomfortable and wouldn't stop following me. They offered to call the police immediately, but at the time I convinced myself maybe I was overreacting. I declined and told them I just wanted to go home. The couple stayed nearby for several more minutes to make sure the man didn't return. They even offered to drive me home, but I refused because my house wasn't far away through the woods. The second we separated, I practically jogged the entire way home. By the time I got back, my nerves were completely shot. I poured myself a large glass of wine, locked every door in the house, and tried convincing myself the situation was over. Eventually, I sat down on my couch and started scrolling through the photos and videos from my hike earlier that day. That's when everything became truly horrifying. I replayed the short video I recorded near the swamp clearing. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed movement behind me. My blood ran cold. Standing partially hidden between the trees in the background was a man wearing a black hoodie and a purple hat. The same man from the restroom. He had been there while I was recording, watching me. I replayed the video over and over, my heart pounding harder each time. He wasn't close enough to fully make out his face, but there was no doubt it was him. The hoodie, the purple hat, the build. Everything matched. That meant he had been following me long before we accidentally met outside the restroom. Suddenly, his behavior made terrifying sense. He hadn't randomly approached me at the park. He had followed me through isolated woods, watched me alone, then tried getting me to follow him somewhere else. The thought made me physically sick. I immediately called the police and explained everything, including the video evidence. Officers came to my house later that night and took a report. They searched the area around the trails and parking lot, but as far as I know, they never identified the man. For weeks afterward, I barely slept. Every creak outside my house made me look out the window. Every unfamiliar car driving through the neighborhood made my stomach tighten. I kept wondering how long he had been watching me before I noticed him. I kept thinking about what might have happened if that couple hadn't walked by when they did. Eventually, I stopped hiking alone entirely. About a year later, I moved away from that town. To this day, I still think about the couple who helped me. They probably don't even realize they may have saved my life that afternoon. And sometimes, late at night, I replay that short video in my mind and picture that purple hat standing motionless behind me in the trees, silently waiting for the perfect moment to step out. About a month ago, my boss asked me if I could house sit and dog sit for him while he and his wife went out of town for a few days. Normally, I would have turned down something like that because I hate sleeping anywhere that isn't my own apartment. But the offer was too good to refuse. First of all, their dog Max was the easiest dog on earth. He barely barked, listened perfectly, and mostly spent his time sleeping on the couch like an old man. Second, my boss was loaded. The kind of rich where his small family home looked like a place celebrities would rent for vacations. He offered me enough money for 4 days that I would have been stupid to say no. So I agreed. The only problem was my sleeping issue. I've never officially called it insomnia, but whenever I stay somewhere unfamiliar, my brain refuses to shut off. I can lie in bed for hours completely exhausted and still never fall asleep. It's like my body decides unfamiliar places automatically equal danger. Knowing that, I came prepared. I brought snacks, headphones, and my Nintendo Switch because I'd recently bought the remake of Paper Mario, The Thousand-Year Door, and figured this would finally give me uninterrupted time to play it. The first night actually went great. Max curled up beside me while I played games in the massive living room until nearly 3 in the morning. The house was quiet, comfortable, and honestly kind of relaxing. By the time I finally tried sleeping, I remember thinking I'd worried for nothing. The second night was when everything started feeling wrong. Around 10 p.m., I took Max outside for his usual walk around the neighborhood. The area was ridiculously quiet at night. Expensive houses lined both sides of the road, and the only sounds came from insects and distant traffic. While walking back toward the house, I noticed what looked like someone standing near the driveway. At first, I slowed down because I couldn't fully make it out in the dark. The figure seemed completely still, almost blending into the shadows near the side of the yard. But as I got closer, there was nobody there. I remember staring at the area for several seconds before brushing it off. Darkness does weird things to your eyes, especially in places you're unfamiliar with. Every bush starts looking like a person if you stare long enough. I went back inside and continued playing my game. A little after 1 a.m., I realized I'd left my phone charger in my car. Annoyed, I threw on my shoes and stepped outside to grab it. That's when I saw someone again. A few houses down the street, directly beneath a streetlight, stood a person dressed entirely in black. They weren't walking. They weren't checking their phone. They were just standing there, completely motionless. It was unsettling in a way I can't fully explain. If they'd been jogging or smoking a cigarette or doing literally anything, I probably wouldn't have cared. But there's something deeply uncomfortable about seeing someone standing perfectly still at 1 in the morning. I tried convincing myself it was just a neighbor outside for fresh air. After all, I was also standing outside at 1 in the morning. I grabbed my charger and quickly went back inside. For the next couple hours, I kept trying to ignore a strange scraping noise coming from somewhere outside the house. At first, I thought maybe it was tree branches rubbing against the siding. Then I convinced myself it could have been an animal moving through bushes. Whatever it was, it started making me anxious. Eventually, I muted my game and stood up to investigate. I walked over to the living room window and peeked outside. The second I looked through the glass, someone sprinted away from the window. I physically jumped backward. The movement happened so fast that my brain barely registered it. One moment there was a face or figure near the glass, and the next it disappeared into darkness. Adrenaline slammed into me instantly. I rushed to another window trying to spot where the person went, but by the time I looked outside again, there was nobody there. The street was empty. The yard was empty. Nothing moved. Looking back now, I know I should have called the police immediately. Someone creeping around outside windows at 3 in the morning is obviously not normal behavior. But for some reason, I didn't feel fully threatened yet. I think because the person ran away instead of trying to break in, my brain minimized it. I convinced myself it was probably teenagers messing around. The next morning I called my boss and told him what happened. Shockingly, he seemed less concerned than I was. He explained that behind his neighborhood was another subdivision where a bunch of teenagers lived, and apparently they sometimes cut through his property late at night. He even admitted he'd caught kids peeking through his windows before. "They're harmless," he told me casually. Maybe he was right. But the explanation didn't make me feel much better. The third night I became hyper-aware of everything. Every creak made me look up. Every passing car made me glance toward the windows. Around 11 p.m. I took Max outside for another walk. This time I found myself scanning the darkness constantly, expecting to see someone. And I did. As we approached the house again, I noticed a dark figure standing near the side yard. Unlike the night before, I didn't slow down. I sped up immediately. The moment I got close enough to confirm it was actually a person, they turned and ran behind the house. I practically dragged Max inside before rushing back out with a flashlight, fueled more by anger than fear now. I searched the backyard thoroughly. Nothing. No movement. No sounds. No person. It genuinely started feeling like someone was intentionally messing with me. Teenagers. That had to be it. I locked every door and window after coming back inside just in case. Hours passed. The house became silent again. Then, for reasons I still can't explain, I looked out the front window one more time. And there they were, standing beneath the streetlight across from the house, perfectly still, just watching. I stared at the figure for several minutes. They never shifted position, never looked away. They simply stood there facing the house like some kind of statue. At that point, frustration completely overpowered common sense. I decided I was tired of feeling paranoid in someone else's home. So I went outside. The second I stepped onto the driveway, I shouted toward the figure, "Hey, can I help you with something?" No response, not even movement. I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. Finally, I announced that I was recording them. Honestly, I mostly wanted proof from my boss because I knew how insane the whole story sounded. I pulled out my phone and started filming. The figure remained motionless for maybe 2 seconds. Then suddenly they charged straight at me. Not jogging, not walking aggressively. Full sprint. The speed shocked me more than anything else. 1 second they were frozen beneath the streetlight, and the next they were racing toward me at full speed. I panicked immediately. I turned and ran for the house as fast as I could. Somewhere during the sprint, I accidentally stopped recording. I barely made it inside before slamming the door shut and locking it. My heart felt like it was trying to explode out of my chest. I looked through the front window expecting to see the person standing outside, but they were gone. I waited there breathing heavily for nearly 10 minutes. Nothing moved outside. No footsteps, no shadows. Eventually, I backed away from the window and sat down in the dining room trying to process what had just happened. Then the doorbell rang. The sound nearly made me jump out of my skin. I froze instantly. A few seconds later, it rang again. I stayed completely silent. Then I heard someone try the doorknob. Slowly, carefully. Thankfully, the door was locked. After a moment of silence, a calm voice spoke from the other side. "Have a good night." The tone was polite, normal. That somehow made it infinitely worse. I finally called the police after that. When the officer arrived, I showed him the short video clip I'd managed to capture before running. Unfortunately, because of the darkness and shaking camera, the footage wasn't useful. The cop admitted there wasn't much they could do besides patrol the area for the rest of the night. Still, his presence helped calm me down enough to survive until morning. When my boss returned the following day, I showed him the video too. The moment he saw the figure beneath the streetlight, his expression changed completely. "That's not one of the neighborhood kids," he said immediately. For the first time, he actually looked disturbed. After hearing everything that happened, he installed ring cameras around the property and motion lights in the backyard. As far as I know, nobody has returned since. But what still bothers me is the complete lack of explanation. Why target me? Why stand outside the house night after night? Why chase me the second I started recording? Some people I've told think it was just an elaborate prank. Maybe they're right. But I don't believe that. Because during those few moments, running back to the house while hearing footsteps behind me, sitting in silence while someone calmly rang the doorbell outside, I genuinely believed I was in danger. And even now, months later, I still think about that person standing motionless beneath the streetlight, waiting in the dark like they already knew exactly where I was. Ron had always been the calm one in our friend group. Nothing rattled him. Not losing money in poker, not getting pulled over, not even when he accidentally backed his truck into his neighbor's mailbox. So when he called me late one Friday night and asked if we could meet for drinks because he needed to talk, I knew something had to be seriously wrong. At the time, he and his wife Tina had just moved into a new house a few months earlier. It wasn't huge, but it was beautiful in a cozy sort of way. Quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, the kind of place where people still waved from their porches. They got the house surprisingly cheap too, though there was one catch. Someone had died there years earlier. The real estate agent had disclosed it immediately, and according to Ron, that little detail shaved a decent amount off the asking price. Personally, I didn't think it mattered. People die in houses all the time. Unless the corpse was still sitting in the kitchen, I couldn't care less. When I met Ron at the bar, he barely touched his drink. He kept glancing around like somebody was watching him. Eventually, I asked how married life in the new house was going. Instead of answering, he stared into his beer for several seconds. Then he quietly said, "I think something's wrong with that house." I laughed instantly. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I genuinely thought he was joking. Ron didn't laugh back. "What do you mean wrong?" I asked. He hesitated before saying the word. "Haunted." I nearly spit my drink out. For the next 20 minutes, Ron explained everything that had been happening. Every night, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning, he and Tina would wake up to noises echoing through the house. Footsteps, scraping sounds, sudden loud bumps that sounded like furniture being moved across the floor. At first, they blamed the old plumbing or the house settling. But then little things started changing places. Kitchen drawers would be left open in the morning. Chairs would sit at odd angles. Once, Tina found every cabinet door downstairs hanging open when she swore she'd closed them the night before. Then Ron mentioned his Miami Dolphins coffee mug. Apparently, he always left it beside the coffee machine before bed. One morning it was just gone, completely vanished. They searched the entire kitchen and eventually the whole house, but it had disappeared without a trace. As he told the story, his voice grew shakier. "A few nights ago we heard this huge crash from the basement," he said, "like something heavy falling over." He explained that he forced himself to go downstairs to investigate, though he was terrified the entire time. Their basement was unfinished and packed wall to wall with storage boxes, old furniture, and random junk they hadn't unpacked yet. He said while he was down there, he noticed movement in the corner of the room. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. Movement. Something shifted behind the stacks of boxes. Ron ran upstairs so fast he nearly fell on the steps. Since then, neither he nor Tina had gone back into the basement. By this point, he was visibly sweating. "They think if we keep messing with it, it'll get angry," he whispered. "Like in Paranormal Activity." That almost made me laugh again, but I stopped myself when I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Ron wasn't joking. This man truly believed something evil was living in his basement. And somehow, Tina believed it even more than he did. According to him, they'd spent the last 2 nights sleeping in a hotel because they were too afraid to stay in their own home. I tried to calm him down. I explained that horror movies rot people's brains and make them imagine things that aren't there. Old houses creak. Pipes bang. People forget where they leave mugs. But no matter what I said, Ron wouldn't budge. Finally, mostly out of frustration, I offered to go inspect the basement myself. "I'll prove there's nothing down there," I said. Ron looked horrified. He immediately told me Tina would never allow it because she thought provoking the spirit would make things worse. That statement alone almost made me cancel the conversation entirely. But Ron looked so exhausted and miserable that I felt bad for him. Eventually, he agreed to drive me there while Tina was out visiting her sister. The whole ride over, Ron begged me not to antagonize anything in the basement, just in case. I promised him I wouldn't, though internally I fully intended to mock every imaginary ghost in the building. When we arrived, Ron refused to even step inside. "I'll wait in the car," he said nervously. That should have been my first warning that something about the situation wasn't normal. Still, I went in alone. The house itself seemed completely ordinary, quiet, clean, nothing creepy whatsoever. Well, almost nothing. There was a strange smell lingering through parts of the house. Not rotten exactly, more like intense body odor mixed with mildew. It was unpleasant enough that I immediately noticed it. I assumed maybe something in the basement had gotten damp. A few moments later, I opened the basement door and headed downstairs. The basement was cluttered beyond belief. Towers of cardboard boxes lined the walls. Old lamps, broken shelves, Christmas decorations, junk everywhere. I spent a couple minutes looking around before deciding to have a little fun. I pulled out my phone and started recording myself in selfie mode. I figured I'd send the video to Ron afterward as proof that his demon was actually just dust and storage bins. I remember grinning into the camera. "So far," I said, "I haven't seen any ghosts, monsters, or paranormal activity at all. Just all your useless junk." Then I turned slightly so the camera could capture the room behind me. That's when I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. Sitting motionless behind a stack of boxes in the corner was an old man. Not a ghost, not a shadow, a real person. His skin looked pale gray under the dim basement light. His eyes were wide and glossy, almost plastic-looking. He was filthy. His beard was tangled. His clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in months. And he was staring directly at me. For one frozen second, neither of us moved. Then pure instinct took over. I stopped recording and bolted upstairs so fast I nearly tripped. I slammed the basement door shut and threw my body against it just as something crashed into the other side. The man began screaming. Not words at first, just horrible, raw wailing. The sound echoed through the house like an injured animal. My hands shook violently as I called Ron. "There's a guy in your basement," I yelled the second he answered. "Call the police right now." Meanwhile, the man on the other side of the door kept trying to force it open. Every few seconds, the doorknob twisted violently. Then the screaming changed. "No, no, no, no." He kept repeating it over and over in this panicked, broken voice. I shouted back at him to stay downstairs while using my full weight to keep the door shut. Those 10 minutes waiting for the police felt like an hour. Finally, I heard sirens outside. Relieved, I loosened my grip slightly. Huge mistake. The basement door exploded open so hard it knocked me backward. The old man burst upstairs and stopped directly in front of me. Up close, he smelled unbearable. Sweat, dirt, and something sour and rotten all mixed together. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. Then he screamed directly into my face. The sound was so loud and sudden that I actually stumbled backward onto the floor. Before I could react, he sprinted through the kitchen and out the back door. And somehow, despite looking half dead, the guy was unbelievably fast. By the time the police finally entered the house, he was gone. I yelled for them to chase him, but they never found him. Afterward, we searched the basement with the officers. In the corner where I'd seen him sitting was a filthy blanket and a small pillow. Empty food wrappers were scattered nearby. And sitting beside the blanket was Ron's missing Miami Dolphins mug. That's when everything finally clicked into place. The noises, the moved furniture, the missing objects, the smell, the haunting. Some mentally unstable homeless man had been secretly living in their basement the entire time. To this day, I still think about how much worse things could have been. Ron later admitted that Tina almost never locked the doors because she grew up in safe neighborhoods and believed nothing bad could happen there. At some point, either while they slept or while they were away, that man had simply walked into their house and stayed. And honestly, that's far scarier than any ghost story I've ever heard.